And now we're back after a short break, and we will have our first guest tonight to talk about EU's Russiagate hitting German AfD far-right party. Dr. Andreas Umland, political scientist, Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Andreas, good to have you, good to see you. Let's look at this. What we're getting out is this first name of this whole Russiagate scandal that's brewing across, thanks to Czech sources, mind you, from the last few days. Peter Bistron, the AfD Bundestag's foreign policy spokesman. I mean, at the same time, I'm looking at this, we're getting this information, influence peddling. There seems to be money, apparently, that was paid by pro-Russian forces here. But it's not a surprise here, is it? It's the usual suspects. The AfD have always had these close ties to Russia. Should we really be surprised? What's going to come out of this because of this new find?
Yes, this is an old story, and it's quite remarkable that this person, who is the number 2 on the list of the AfD, or the Alternative for Germany, AfD is the German abbreviation for the European parliamentary elections. So this is a significant figure within the AfD. We had a few years ago, actually, another case that was also partly connected to Poland, where a certain employee of the AfD called Manuel Ochsenreiter has tried, in collaboration with some Polish men, to do a terrorist act in Ukraine, and that was apparently also arranged by Russia, this terrorist act. And now we have this this case here now with the Bistron, who has apparently been paid for giving interviews to a Russian website that calls itself Voice of Europe. So there was earlier once a Voice of Russia channel, TV channel and radio channel, but now it's called Voice of Europe, and Bistron and other far-right politicians have been giving interviews for this media.
So apparently this is exactly what happened about Bistron, but there is supposedly a recording that would prove that Bistron is guilty. When do you think this sort of evidence is going to be released to back those claims?
I hope as soon as possible, because it has, as I already mentioned, a rather high importance for the German part of the European parliamentary elections in June, as Bistron is on the list, and so that would then perhaps lead to removal from this list. And he has already had a profile within the German parliament as a pro-Russian speaker, and he has been giving speeches where he defended Putin and so on. So he is already known in Germany as one of the most politicians of the AfD, and that would then perhaps be a certain blow also for the AfD. And the AfD leadership seems to be quite nervous about this entire case.
Mm-hmm. But even if the AfD's leadership is nervous about it, and if we do get some kind of evidence in the next few days or weeks about it, and let's say he's removed from the list, that doesn't really change the fact that the AfD in Germany, and I think the most recent polling, is one of the strongest parties. I mean, if the Bundestag had its elections, which they have on I believe in 2025, the AfD would run anywhere between 17, 18%. I mean, that's more than the Social Democrats, that's more than the Greens, it's more than the FDP. So will this really change this, I think, serious issue that Germany has with the AfD? And it's not just in the east of Germany, right? This is also in Bavaria. Is this going to really maybe motivate some more movement away from this party, or what's next?
One would hope so. After the full-scale invasion in 2022, Russia and Putin have become unpopular in Germany. The AfD had always a peculiar position here. in that it was apologetic towards Russia. But if it would now turn out indeed that Russia has been paying an AfD parliamentarian who is now a candidate for the European Parliament, that would perhaps have a certain effect. How much the effect will be is still difficult to say, because the especially as you mentioned in East Germany, it has a fairly strong position there in certain parts of East Germany. It's not just the second strongest; it's actually the strongest party, and so probably the AfD will still have deputies in the next European Parliament, but perhaps one or two less than without this scandal.
Mm-hmm.
Which I wanted to follow up on your question, on the question that you just asked, because you mentioned the elections for the Bundestag, if they were to happen now. But we are ahead of the EU elections, so it makes one wonder. Apparently, there is a whole network of these politicians in the European Union that were involved. And I wonder if there's going to be a sort of a domino effect, if we're about to find out about some other politicians from other countries, perhaps, that were involved. What do you think this could potentially do to the EU parliamentary elections?
I'm not sure, because we had earlier the case of the Front National of Marine Le Pen that got money from Russia, and that was a problem for Le Pen, but it did not have a large effect on Le Pen. So there is a certain correlation, one could say, between the sort of pro-Putin, pro-Russian views on the one side and a proclivity to vote for the. So it made the core electorate of these parties that much of an effect. But perhaps for the, let's say, less ideological voters for these far-right parties, it could still have an effect, since especially the full-scale invasion, this sort of Russian partnership that many of the parties had in the past has become a liability for these parties. So perhaps it will have an effect, and perhaps also, I didn't answer the question about the Bundestag elections next year. Also, the support for the party could go down, but that will depend, I'm afraid, also on other things like the refugee issue, socioeconomic developments in Germany.
On that, yeah, Andreas, but I think what's worrying here, I remember that not too long ago we had very big counter demonstrations across Germany, especially also in the east, that were against the AfD. And there was a lot of people on the streets. I think in Munich even, I think they had to call it off because there's so many people. But nevertheless, I think that didn't really dent the numbers and the support for AfD, because I think there's 18%, that's still from the last few days ago. I think they may have lost like a percentage point. So I think this is still, I think, a party that has deep roots in Germany, a growing following, whether you like it or not. And I think, though, the sinister connection there, it wasn't that long ago, 2022, with the arrests of 25 individuals across all different states, federal states in Germany, this potential coup. And one of those key figures, I believe, was also former AfD member Birgit Masak-Winkemann, right, who was supposed to be the new justice figure in this coup if it had been successful. So I'm just wondering, at which point will the German public finally connect the dots and see that there is a really sinister force here that has Moscow written all over it? Or is this just people digging their head in the sand? And what's going to happen in the next few months?
Yes, some people are perhaps indeed digging their heads in the sand, as you say. But as I said, the core electorate of the AfD will not be much impressed by that. We have a different situation here than in Poland, where there are still sort of pro-Russian views, and for many of these voters, this will not be a problem, this connection to Russia. And it will be a problem, I think, for the AfD in terms of being taken seriously by other parties, and it may be also a liability, especially for the East German AfD, after after the next regional elections we're going to have this year, when perhaps the party will, on the regional level, become the strongest in some of the regions, and then it will be looking for coalition partners, and in that constellation, then I think it would be very difficult for any centrist parties to go even into an informal agreement with the AfD if the AfD indeed gets this image of being basically an agent of Moscow in Germany.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's still a sinister topic that will not go away. And as you said, I think we're going to find more investigative results as this whole Russiagate unfolds over the next coming weeks. We'll have to conclude it there. Always a pleasure to speak to you. That was Dr. Andreas Umland. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.